Hey everyone, welcome to the live stream tonight, or today, depending where you are. I'm happy to be on YouTube and Twitch with everybody on this nice slow news day, nothing happening in the world, so we can all relax and enjoy some sculpting some beautiful spiders together. And I'm continuing what I started last week, which was this Lynx spider. It's just my favorite material here, so I have some. These are some reference images I've collected online. So this is basically where we're headed. And I think this one, it's not a super heavy detailed sculpt. And you can see there's some detail in there, but it's not overly crazy. So a lot of this is going to come down to the color. And I always pick this spider because I love it. It's the beautiful bright green. It's a pretty common spider. Something you'll find in your garden. And I'm sculpting a male, and I point that out because when we sculpt the pedipalps here, these parts right here, we'll have to pay attention. They should be a bit larger than what you'd find in the female. And so what we did last week is blocked out the basic structure and roughly using Z-spheres, getting the proportions right, and then sculpting out the legs. These are the pedipalps, the legs here, the glycery, and that kind of thing. I'm going to find some better reference for the underside. So I'll start by working on the legs here. So really what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on sculpting these front legs here, a fair amount of detail, then I'll duplicate those and replace the other legs with that, with those legs. I think that's a pretty straightforward approach. And so if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to join me in the chat. I'll answer your questions as best as I can. So let's see here. I'm going to take a look. So right now we have no levels of subdivision, about 3,000 points for the legs. And I do have some. No, that's the pedipalps. I'm going to do legs. These guys right here. Okay. All right, so this is the coxa right here. We have the femur, trochanter. Actually, I think this is called the patella on spiders. Let's take a look at the diagram of spider legs. Let's see. There we go. This is the same genus, but not the same species. And I should have these as different polygroups. Let's see. Yep. So what I'll do is I'll start by turning on my mask by polygroups. It makes it easier to move these parts without affecting the other parts. I have the legs all as one subtool. Let's subdivide this. I have little spots on these guys. And the legs here. And some very, I don't know. Makes me think of dessert or ice cream or something. That's probably weird to think. You think of ice cream when you're sculpting a spider, but that's what it makes me think of. I don't eat a lot of spiders, though. Just in case anybody's wondering. Hopefully, I don't think I've ever eaten a spider. Not intentionally, anyways. Well, thanks very much for the comment. Really appreciate it. Hoping to get a lot more stuff done this summer. Things have calmed down a little bit with me, and so I can focus more on doing some artwork. And I have a backlog of personal projects I'm going to do, both insect related and non-insect related. The other thing I'm hoping to do is get into the garden with my camera more often. We saw a nice bright green spider the other day, but it was not a lynx spider. This I don't think is a segmentation here. This is coloration. It's hard to tell. This almost looks like a segment there. I think this is a little bit clearer. Maybe I'll use that. I'll just get it roughly in place. There's a great book called The Biology of Spiders, which I think everyone who's a creature designer should read. It's a very short book. Let me see if I can pull it up online. This is what we're talking about. I think you can get a PDF of it because it's an old book. Not that I'm promoting Amazon, but this book right here by Rainer F. Folex. I can't pronounce the name right. Now this looks really expensive, but I know you can get a cheaper version. And I think you can get a, let's see if I can find PDF. Blah, blah, blah. Anyways, I think you get a, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Well, anyways, that's the, let me do this. Stupid cookie notification. If you can find a copy of this book for cheap or downloadable, it's really worth it. It's a fantastic book. It's an old book, but it's pretty cool. Really great illustrations. And great information. And it's a very short book, too. I don't know where my copy is. Probably in a box somewhere. Anyways, okay, let's get back to ZBrush. Enough of that. Yes, references in real life are the best. And I also, somewhere I have a picture of this particular spider that I took in when I was at a bug shot in Austin, Texas. And that's one of the reasons why I like it so much, because it's kind of a very gentle, beautiful looking spider. And, you know, slow moving, which is nice for if you're trying to take photographs. I have lots of pictures of plants where fast moving insects used to be a few seconds before I took the picture. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll, you know, even though I've already ZRemesh this, I'll sculpt some of the kind of basic forms and then do another ZRemesh just to get the topology to more closely resemble, you know, the forms. I mean, this is really just a bunch of twigs. But at the same time, it's nice to have that a better edge flow. And I don't really do manual topology of something like this, because every time I've done that, I'm just like, well, you know, ZRemesh could have done pretty much just as good a job of making a bunch of tubes. The main thing you want to avoid when you do ZRemesh on something like this is just excessive spirals, because that makes UV texture mapping a little bit of a pain. But if you can get nice clean topology without spirals, which is not too hard to do with a ZRemesher, then you're in luck. That's the way to go. And these spider legs are rarely difficult to sculpt. They're usually pretty straightforward. I'm trying to think of any spiders that I've sculpted that's really tough. Well, jumping spiders are a little bit trickier because their legs can be slightly different proportions from one pair of legs to the next. But they're not as hard as like bees' legs or something like that, which have very specific shapes. I like this sort of the look of this though, with the kind of a curved cone. It's just a neat shape. Good inspiration for robots here for sure. Saw this great article on the news this week. It was kind of cracking me up just for one quote. They were talking about sea spiders, which I believe are more like crustaceans than actual. I don't think they're arachnids. They usually live deep under the sea. I could be wrong about that. I have to double check. But what was funny about the article is they're talking about how sea spiders digest methane. Oh, the marine arthropod. Huh, interesting. These are sea spiders. So it kind of collects bubbles of methane all over its body, and it will scrape these bubbles off and ingest it. Which is really kind of cool. But the funny thing about the article is the scientist saying it's just like you would be eating eggs for breakfast. I'm like, that's not how I eat eggs for breakfast. I don't recall ever scraping them off of my body and ingesting them that way. This looks like a BS picture, by the way. This is not real, I don't think. Because these things are fairly deep sea. That's why they have such fragile bodies. But they're kind of cool. Yeah, deep sea spiders. So it's unlikely they'd be walking on the beach like this. It seems highly suspect to me. Okay, let's just do that real quick. Thing I do want to check is okay, just a quick review on spider leg anatomy. So we have coxa, trochanter, femur, patella, tibia, metatarsus, tarsus, and claws. Let's get a couple of these pictures here. I think it's pretty... Yeah, the sizes vary from one spider to the next, but it seems to be pretty consistent. So the terminology is similar to what we find in insects. So this is the patella. Yeah, I was right about that. It's been a while since I've looked this stuff up. So we have the coxa. We might have a trochanter in here, so I'll probably see if it's visible on our spider. This is the femur, patella, tibia, metatarsus, tarsus, and claws. So we do have a couple segments here. So I'm missing a segment. I think this one should be divided based on our illustrations of our guy. So we'll probably have... So how do we go about doing that after we've started? What I'm going to do is go down to second subdivision level. Let's delete lower and delete higher. And I'm just going to mask this. And hold the control key and just duplicate it. Hold the control key and move with the gizmos. A quick way to duplicate part of a subtool, unmask part of a subtool, but you have to remember to not have subdivision levels in order for it to work. Oops, let's turn on symmetry, local symmetry, and then we'll just put this like this. Oops. Let's make sure that we go to polygroups. Go to groups. Shorten this. There we go. Then what I'll do is go to geometry. Here and move. Actually, let's do this. So what I want to do is, this is out of sync now in terms of polygroups and shapes with this leg. So what I'm going to do down here is I want to just do a quick mirror and weld to kind of fix that. So, but if I do a mirror and weld right now, it's going to mirror this one over to here, and I want the opposite. So I'm going to mirror these guys and then do mirror and weld. Now they're the same. Make sure they're in the right place. Yep. Okay. So probably a few more steps than it's actually necessary, but that's one way you can insert a segment, because it happens to me every once in a while. I miss a segment or I get the wrong number. You know, whether it's an insect or a spider or something like that. So just have to do a quick fix there. Yeah, today they seem to have a lot of ZBrush live streams. It's nice. Maybe things are a little bit slower, and so the ZBrush streamers have a little bit more time. I'm happy that I've been able to do this consistently now. For a few months there, it was kind of, I got busy with a bunch of stuff, so it was hard to make sure I got one in every week. But from now, right at this point, I should be able to do one every week for the rest of the summer. Let's do this real quick. Okay, I'm going to do a quick ZRemesh just to get this lower poly count and get rid of some of these little blobs here that I can't stand. Make it hard to make it smooth and straight. Getting a little OCD here. Okay, let's make sure that I have poly groups on, and I'm going to go up to the Coxa here and let's see if we can see some of these segments in our spider in the photographs. It's like if you take a look at the Coxa here, it's like the trochanter is just buried just right inside there, and based on that illustration. And let's see if we can find any photographs that bear this out. It's hard to see because this guy's so translucent. You can kind of see right there, a little division there. So what I'll do is kind of like what I did before. I'm going to control click on this to mask everything else out. Let's move it out a little bit and then control drag. You shrink this down just a little bit so we have another segment there. So this is the trochanter and there's the coxa. And then we have that. So what I'll do is I'm going to do polygroups. This is what I need to do is let's do preferences, config, enable customize, and go down here to polygroups and hold Control Alt and just drag this down here. And we'll also do that with mirror and weld, so I have to keep hunting for the stupid button. And maybe this time I'll actually remember to save out my preferences. Mirror and weld. Let's put it down here. Also delete hidden because I use that a lot. And okay, we'll keep that the way it is. Do preferences, store config. Sorry about that. And then preferences, save config. No, store config. Same thing. I just did it twice for some reason because my brain doesn't work. Turn off enable customize. Okay. Let's do auto groups and mirror and weld. So now the groups are consistent. And then we can do this. Tuck around there. Okay, that's good enough. Turn on, oops. I want to do polyframe. And let's do ZRemesh. Keep groups half and turn off adapt. Okay, cool. divide this up to get it a bit more heavy in terms of the point count, and then start actually detailing this a little bit more now that I have the general shape down. Just where these segments meet, draw a little bit more detail there, a little bit more overlap. And then I'll go clay tubes. I'm going to lower my Z intensity on clay tubes and just kind of fill this in right here. I like to keep it a little bit rough, so some of that detail and some of that organic kind of quality comes through after I subdivide and detail it some more. Like I always say, I don't want things to be too neat because then it'll look mechanical, not organic. So I like the kind of sort of rough detail that the clay tubes, that square alpha leaves behind. And, you know, I spent a lot of time on the legs, but like I mentioned earlier, I really only have to detail one set of legs. And, you know, because then I can just duplicate and replace the other ones. And usually what I'll do is I'll do it a few times. Like I'll do a pass where I'll get the legs into a decent shape, then duplicate them and replace the other legs with that one, and then work some more on a pair of legs, especially when I'm doing poly painting and that kind of thing, and then duplicate again. I don't want to make it too obvious that they're duplicates though, so, but I want to kind of minimize the amount of replication of work as much as possible. So I'm not needlessly doing the same thing over and over again. I mean, it's good practice, but at the same time, it's not very efficient. So get that kind of looking like that. Fill this in a little bit. What I'm going to do is dig into this a little bit. I think what I want to do is also turn on under auto masking. Let's make sure that Clay Tubes has backface mask turned on, so I'm not creating any ugly distortions in the thinner parts. That looks pretty good. What I'll tell you, I'm doing the same thing. I'll probably start selling some of my insect models on Fab as well. Here's my suggestion, the way I'm going about doing it. The most important thing, well, you know, the subject matter is obviously important. You got to do what you're most excited about. Try not to do anything that everybody's like, there's a million characters. You know, sexy elf check. I don't know if the world needs any more sexy elf girls. But what I would do, well, it always does, but, you know, in terms of selling things on Fab, what I would do is look at some of the top rated models, the ones that get downloaded a lot, and look at how it's marketed. Look at how the screenshots are done, as well as the information provided and the formats provided. You probably most likely want to do something that can be brought directly into Unreal with the least amount of trouble. You know, Unreal, and then if you have time, do a version for Unity, because that's where you're going to get a lot of downloads, and then like a USD or AFDX format one. But what you should do is, you know, look at the ones that are selling the highest, and then buy one of them, and look at how they have packaged the model, because that's the most important thing in terms of, you know, because when I do some jobs that are really fast, or I'm working for a client, what they'll do is, like, let's say they're doing a first previs or first rough cut. What they'll do is they'll purchase a model from like Fab or TurboScoot or wherever, and then I end up getting the model. I had to base my production model based on that. whatever they've downloaded. So I've seen a lot of really crappy models, and I've seen a few really good models. And what you want to do is, in order for, because you're going to be essentially creating a brand. Once you sell one model, you want to make sure that you're selling others. You want people to say, "Oh yeah, it's I know this guy. He makes great model. This person, this artist makes great models," and so they'll start buying from you consistently. If when they download the model, it number one lives up to exactly how you advertised it. In other words, nobody likes to download a model and find out that the UVs are all screwed up, or that the rig doesn't work as well as they thought it would, or it looks really good when its textures are on, and you turn the textures off and it looks terrible and bad with topology, etc. You want to create the least amount of work for your customer in terms of what they need to do to prep their model for work, because most of the time when somebody is buying a model, unless it's a hobbyist, but I'm talking things professionally, they're doing it because they're trying to save time and money. That's why they want the model. And so anything you can do to make sure that they save time and money will help you build up a little brand identity. So download or purchase, take the time to buy a model that's very popular and gets a lot of downloads. It's maybe similar to what you want to do, whether it's a creature, character, prop, or whatever, and then look at how it's packaged. How are the textures packaged? What formats are the textures in? What resolutions are offered? What resolutions to the model, etc. And then just copy that. Make sure that your model is packaged the same way, so somebody can easily unzip the package and know exactly where to put the textures, and the textures work, etc. So that's basically, like a high quality product. That's the best way to do it. If you look a lot at bug scans that you can find, especially the free ones, they look really great because whoever's done the scan work has included the textures as part of the scan. And then you turn the textures off on the model and realize that your model, number one, the textures UVs are a mess, and the model is really just a blob of polygons that had a okay texture, a scan texture applied to it. So it looks really good in the picture online, and then looks like crap when you bring it to ZBrush. So you want to kind of avoid that kind of thing. A lot of times with the scans, though, people are just churning out scans as fast as possible, and a lot of times they're free. If you're interested in learning about doing insect modeling, getting a free scan and then cleaning it up and improving the textures is a great way to practice. And there's lots of free stuff on there. I hope that's good advice. And then when you do animations, if it's a loop or something, make sure it's a nice loop that is clean and loops perfectly, and you give a number of different, cycles to go with the model. And then it works as advertised when people bring it into Unreal or Unity, and then to a lesser extent Blender and Maya. But if you can get a model that's really tight and really optimized for game engines, then that's the game engines are a little bit less forgiving than something like Maya or Blender. So if you can get a nice clean model that works in a game engine for real-time rendering, then it's no problem to make sure that it works in Blender or Maya or something like that. And then I would say offer a number of different cycles. I have a pretty big library now of high quality insect and spider models, and so I'm going to start selling them as well. It's just a matter of finding the time to prep them. I always get kind of disappointed though when a client hands me a pre-made model, because I'd rather model it myself, obviously. That's more fun and more billable hours, but at the same time, that's just production is all about efficiency, and I don't want to waste time with if they don't have to. The model's available already. I haven't had a chance to really spend a whole lot of time on Fab since they've redone everything, so hopefully it's still good. I mean, I liked Megascans a lot. It was very easy to use, and I hope they haven't screwed that up. Just creating kind of a slot right here. I don't know if this is super accurate, but just get it in the ballpark first, and then I'll refine it based on my reference here. Let's take a look at the reference. That's the joint right here. It's really hard to tell because it's so translucent, but it almost looks like there's a kind of a bulge here. Looks like I want to make this a bit wider up here, so I got it kind of backwards. It should be wider up here and thinner up here, down here. So go down here, and let's just hit it with the flame brush. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to control click on this to save the history state. Whoops, no. Go here. Thank you. And go down to the lowest subdivision level. Just insert a couple edge loops here. Delete higher. Oops. Bastard. Someday ZBrush really annoy the hell out of me. I'm going to do edit, delete older, undo do history. There we go. So now it's easier to select that. There we go. Okay. There we go. I felt like it didn't have enough edge loops there at the lowest subdivision level. It's looking a little too blocky. All right, I'm obsessing a little bit too much there. And here as well. that for now. Sorry about the sniffing. Having allergies all of a sudden. Where can I find insect blueprints like these? Books, I mentioned this last week. Books are always a good bet. And specifically, you want to look for keys. And so what a key is a book that entomologists and arachnologists will use when they're trying to identify a species. So they found, the main thing is, have they found a new species or not? So what they'll do is, I have one of these books. Here's an example of the key. Right? So what they'll do is, they have one of these books, and they have a specimen that they found. They take it in a lab under the microscope. They're trying to identify what the species might be. And so they look at the different parts of the spider or the bug, and if they find something like the coxa looks like this, the abdomen looks like that, if that's what it looks like, then go to this page. And it's kind of like a choose your own adventure. You keep drilling down until you discover what genus, what order, genus, and species you're looking at. I don't even know why I'm wearing headphones. I'm not really listening to anything. But the nice thing about finding those keys is they're filled with really detailed illustrations, and not just spiders, but all kinds of different organisms. So that's a great source, and you can order keys online. Like this one, Spiders in North America is which this one is, and you probably find one for Europe and one for Asia and so on. But you can see they're really great for comparative anatomy. And then there's also, there's stuff online. The stuff online is okay. The best stuff that you find online in terms of illustrations are just scanned from books anyways. But the problem is sometimes they're out of context, or they're really low resolution, or they don't, they have wrong information. But it's a good place to start, because obviously, it gets expensive on buying all these books. But, you probably also, when you're looking for books online, don't forget to check out used books, because the older ones, they can be sometimes really expensive, especially if they're like a text for university class or whatever, or university, like, entomology majors, they have to buy these textbooks. The new ones could be like hundreds of dollars. So that could be, or euros. So that could be expensive. So it's a good idea to check out the used books online and see what you can find. Sometimes, like the biology of spiders, you'll find a downloadable version. One of the things I've discovered over the years is that, late 19th century, early 20th century, or early half of the 20th century is when you had a lot of really great illustrations, detailed illustrations being created, because that's when people were doing a lot of discoveries and things like that. And a lot of modern illustrations, not all, but a lot of them, are just copies of the older illustrations. New edition of a book, new edition of a biology textbook, whatever, they basically look at the work done by, Carl von Frisch or the other really great entomologists, and they kind of just copy that stuff. So sometimes it's good to go to the older books, even though the illustrations sometimes are a little bit harder to read because of the printing quality. Really great book, by the way, since you mentioned it. One of my favorites is E.O. Wilson's Ants. E.O. Wilson, the great ant scientist and biologist, He won a Pulitzer for this book. It's dense as hell. It's got some great biology information in it, but it's also got fantastic illustrations. Let's see. You know, this reminds me of like when I was a kid, used to get books from like World War II, and they'd have diagrams of the various different types of tanks. This is like that, but it's all ants. And the amazing thing is he did all the illustrations himself. So this is a really great one. Obviously kind of an expensive book, but it's worth it because it's big and dense. And you probably didn't realize how incredibly diverse ants are. Hear that thud. How incredibly diverse ants are, and Kurt Cobain. But they really are, and they're quite amazing. If you haven't, I always tell students that if they're getting into doing stuff like bugs, ants are a great place to start because everything is just fairly upfront with ants in terms of the anatomy. And most insect anatomy follows a very similar pattern to ants. It's just the shapes are elongated and you know, evolved into different areas. I mean, an ant and a praying mantis basically have the same body parts. They're just stretched and squished and pushed into really weird shapes for the praying mantis, if you're coming from the point of view of an ant person. And the same with, like, you know, and then obviously for winged insects, you have the addition of insects, the wings to deal with, and there's another level of anatomy there. But ants are a great place to start. Of course, queen ants are winged insects. They just lose their wings. And the males have wings as well. They just don't live very long. By the way, the risk of, I don't want to get into any kind of political discussions because I'm not interested in that. But when people start talking about things like reproduction and they want to convince you that what they understand is just basic science, look at insects and the reproduction of insects, and you find that it's much weirder in the real world than people think it is. It's not very clear cut. Ants are a great example. The biology of ant sex is pretty weird. And spiders too. And spiders, a lot of spiders dance, jumping spiders dance, so that the males dance so they don't get eaten, which I think is amazing. A lot of times with spiders, the males are much smaller than the females as well. There's a really cool, what is it? One of my favorite books. I Contain Multitudes by Ed Yong. That's a great book. It's mostly about bacteria, but there's a lot of stuff in there about insects and the relationship between insects and bacteria. It's a weird, crazy world. Biology is totally insane. It's the craziest of all the sciences. Sorry again for the sniffing. So, for example, there's a species of wasp that is all female. There are no males, and they reproduce a lot through parthenogenesis. And the reason is because at some point in their evolutionary history, there was males, but the males disappeared because they were no longer necessary. But the reason that the males disappeared is because there was a parasitic bacteria that lived within the females of the species, and it was too large to pass through the penis of the males. Yes, insects do have penises, believe it or not, male ones anyways. And so therefore, because of the weirdness of evolution, the males disappeared and the females relied on parthenogenesis for reproduction, which is not that unusual in biology, as the line from Jurassic Park, nature finds a way, demonstrates. The cool thing is that the scientists managed to take a look at these wasps in the lab and remove the bacterium from the system, and over several generations the males reappeared, which is really interesting, breeding them in the lab, which just goes to show you how weird biology actually is. I love it. It's like there's so few rules in biology. There's a lot of rules, but there's even more exceptions. When my friend and I did our animated series on insect eyes, that was the most frustrating thing because I wanted to make a very short, concise animation that explained how insect eyes, compound eyes worked. And every time we come up with a nice, concise definition of some property of eyes, whether it's ommatidia or, that kind of stuff, there's always just a whole bunch of caveats. It's like, this is how ommatidia work, except it's not in the case of, insects, diurnal insects, or insects that are nocturnal or whatever. So we kept running into this situation where we had to have exceptions. And that was just with eyes. It gets even more complicated when you get into other aspects of insect biology. So this is looking a little bit lumpy. That's okay, because I'm going to smooth it out. What I'll do is I'll do a kind of a lumpy version like this, and then go to a lower subdivision level and delete higher levels and subdivide again. So it has that kind of organic quality that I'm trying to get, but not quite of all this kind of detail. I'll show you what I mean. Let's go down to subdivision level 2, just smooth this out a little bit. I'm also talking and sculpting, which kind of sometimes interferes with the way my brain works. Let's make sure we take a look at the reference here. I think if I want to have an angle, I want it to be the other angle, this way, right? Yes, what I would like to do is, when I finish sculpting this, which shouldn't take too long, maybe a few sessions, I'll be working with Redshift renders directly here in ZBrush, and I'll create a translucent material using Redshift. It's not quite as sophisticated as using like Redshift and Maya because I don't have access to file texture nodes to plug into the various parts of subsurface, but I should be able to get a decent translucent kind of color in Redshift for ZBrush, or translucent quality rather. So I'll demonstrate how I do that. I think I'm obsessing a little bit too much about this. This is really not that complicated in terms of legs, but I think let's zoom out here for a second, and I think this is bent a little bit weird. Whoops. What I might do is, after I get the legs duplicated, play with that translucent material a little bit, just to break things up a little bit. Okay, so let's count. Let's make sure we have the right number of segments here. We have our coxa, here is our trochanter, here is our femur, here's our patella, here's our tibia, here's our metatarsus, here's our tarsus, and at the end we have the claw. So, yep, I think we're good. It's always good to double check, because sometimes you forget. And that's the thing, it's like, relying on photographs is difficult, because it's it's hard to see some of the details. So you have to use both illustrations. The other thing that's tough about spiders is, unlike insects, using a dead specimen is really difficult because they shrivel up when they die. And that's because they have a lot of, you know, I don't know why I always do that, but anyways, their, you know, their muscle system is basically like a fluid or hydrostatic system. So there's pressure, fluid pressure within the limbs that it uses to actually move its muscles around. So that means when it dies, it gets desiccated and that fluid is lost, and so it shrivels up, and you don't see any of the beautiful colors or translucency, and everything gets all weird and warped and crinkled. And so sometimes with some arachnids you can use molts with cave spiders, or amblypygid, or that kind of thing, or scorpions. That works pretty well, but with spiders even a molt tends to get all shriveled. The dense hair of the tarantula, I would say it's not super complex to create a translucent material. It's a lot of subsurface kind of stuff in Redshift. I would say that one of the things that I like about Redshift for Maya as opposed to Redshift for ZBrush is they also have a translucency channel in addition to like the subsurface stuff, although I think that's changed in more recent versions. But so you have a few more options for translucence in the full version of Redshift than you do in the ZBrush version, but it's still, you can do it. But yeah, it's mostly about getting a nice subsurface quality in there, and also good lighting, you know. In terms of creating the dense hair of a tarantula, well, XGen is one way to go about doing it. If I'm working in a program like Maya, I like Yeti, even though Yeti is an extra cost, and of course there are updates and that kind of thing, but Yeti works. Yeti, what I like about it is the groom brushes are really easy to use, and they behave the way you want them to. Like, fiber mesh drives me nuts because you have to be really careful about how you apply the fiber mesh in order to make it groom easily using polygrouping or whatever. And then the groom brushes are really, it's difficult to get them to behave. You brush from one side, everything looks good. You rotate the model and then brush again, and it screws everything up. It becomes like whack-a-mole, which I can't stand. And with Yeti, the groom brushes behave much more like you'd expect. XGen I didn't use for a while, and I haven't used it in a while, mainly because it was so incredibly buggy for so long, and I got so frustrated with it that I switched to doing Yeti, and I really enjoyed Yeti a lot. I've also used in the past in Maya Paint Effects, which you can convert to polygons and then render in Arnold or Redshift and that. And for bug hair, if it's not too dense, that works pretty well. Because the other thing is I, if I rig and animate the model, I want the hair to follow it. What I'm doing right now is I'm experimenting with the bumblebee model that I modeled in the past few sessions, and I'm going to be using Blender for, and just as a comparison. So it's going to be my first experience using Blender's hair system to see how that works. Okay, so the claw is going to be tough. Well, we got a decent image right here. This one is more like, I think, jumping spider kind of thing. And some of these are just like typical internet illustrations, like thanks for the 7 pixels, that really solved things. Yeah, this illustration is just a little itty bitty toes, spider toes. Not much there. So let's see if I can find anything on photograph. Yeah, they're going to be like this, very blurry. A lot of the illustrations that you find in the older texts, of course, were created before they had things like scanning electron microscopes, so that's also going to be difficult to find detailed images of like spider feet. But I think for this guy, it's going to be just couple little hairs for the so I'm not going to worry too much about it. You can see a little claw coming out there. I might add that at the very end. The thing about this spider for the hair is it's so sparse that I'm tempted to actually just model a hair and then position it manually, which I know sounds horrific in terms of workflow. But also this one, you know, for this particular project, since I'm doing everything in ZBrush, we could probably do fiber mesh, but there's so few hairs that it wouldn't actually be that bad to like move them around manually. I've done that before. And the thing about when you do it that way is it's slow, but it ends up looking really nice, especially when you have these long spikes here. So I'll probably do that. Let's do this. I'm going to take my geometry here. Let's go down to subdivision level 2. I'm going to delete higher, and then I'm going to subdivide. And I think that's kind of the look I'm going for. I mean, let's see. I'm going to undo that real quick. Actually, yeah, I think that looks pretty good. It's got a little bit of organic wobble in there, which I like, but not too much, so it's out of control. So I think that works pretty well. So that will be our spider legs. So let's save this. Yeah, so that's a good question about the mentoring. So I'm working on, I'm thinking about it because I am, and I'm going to say this with no amount of humility here, but I am officially a ZBrush master trainer, which means Pixelogic, since I've been doing ZBrush for so long and written books and taught it and all that kind of stuff, has given me the authority to actually certify people in ZBrush, which is important in some job markets, like here in Europe. That can be very important. So what I'll be announcing later this year is creating a program where I will be teaching privately online, and I'll create a sign up for this and all that kind of thing, with the aim of people who want to get certified in ZBrush. So, you know, I'll figure out the cost of it and all that kind of stuff and how I'm going to do it. But along those lines, I might start or do a program where sort of a private teaching thing. But I have to figure it out based on my schedule because I am a working artist and my schedule can be kind of chaotic. So that's something I'm hoping to sort out by the end of the summer. So I'll probably be doing something like that. Unfortunately, based on economics, I can't do any free mentorships if that's what you're looking for. I have to make a living just like everybody else. But I'm thinking that I've been looking, noticing that there's a lot of like music teachers online that have YouTube channels that do private lessons as well. So I might base a model kind of like that. But I have to see based on my schedule. And then what I'll probably do is set up like some kind of system where I do an evaluation where, we have like a one-on-one, like over a Zoom or something like that. Like a half an hour, 45 minutes, just to kind of assess where your skills are and figure out what the best kind of plan for mentoring would be based on that. So keep bugging me about it. Sorry, that's a bit of a pun. Keep bugging me about it over the summer, and I think hopefully, because I'm just finishing up some projects now, so I'm trying to free up some time so I can create like a system. Does that answer your question? I hope that makes some sense. But also, I'm hoping to start adding more to my YouTube channel in the coming weeks. So, entomology and otherwise related. Right now, I'm working on something for the Gnomon workshop, which has been taking up all my time. Not necessarily bug related, but cool, man. I'm glad you like my teaching style. I enjoy teaching. It's a lot of fun. And then there's a lot of cool techniques like working with scan data and all that kind of stuff. I'm still learning the entomology stuff, obviously. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to turn on transparency. Let's select this subtool and let's give it a name. I have glare on my screen, which is why I'm having a hard time reading this kind of stuff. Okay, here we go. We'll just call this front legs. And the other thing I've done a lot of recently is 3D printing or prepping models like this for print, which I think is very useful. Useful skill to have because I think museums are very interested in that kind of thing. So I'm going to move the gizmo here and then move this over here and rotate and just get it kind of close in terms of scale. And I should have saved this as a project. I'm just going to get it kind of close. Yeah, I mean, I've been doing like poly painting since before Substance was around. I love Substance Painter, although my wife Irene is much better at it than I am. But then the nice thing about being forced to doing a lot of texturing in ZBrush is that I have some good techniques that are very useful for doing bugs and that kind of thing. Obviously, I need to get some better reference to the bottom of the spider here because this is kind of a blank slate, and there's a lot more going on here. Although I've done enough spider models before that I can glean a lot of information for the bottom part here. So let's duplicate this and we'll rename this. Let's rename these. Call this mid legs. And we'll duplicate this. Oops, it's front legs, mid legs. I need to bring my diagram back. And then okay, so I have that. Now I'm going to go and get rid of my old legs. Not those. Get rid of that. It's always good to save before you start deleting things because you can't undo deleting a subtool. So let's delete this one. Alt click right here to select that. Make doubly sure that's the right one we want to delete. Delete. Okay. Delete. Okay. There we go. Let's save this next. Next one. So these pictures, no, these I took online, so from the internet. But I do often shoot my own reference images for like the bee model that I was working on. And I've taken a number of pictures of spiders that I use for reference, and also molts. When I did the Ampli and Blypygid, I purchased a molt, and then basically it was really wonderfully done. So I had to be very careful about taking it out of the frame. And then I took a lot of pictures. And then longhorn beetle I did last year. I put that in a light box and I took pictures. What triggered my fascination and interest in invertebrates is, yes, deleting a bunch of subtools can cause a crash. I started out a long time ago, late 90s, working at the Howard Hughes Medical Institute as an animator. It's a very lucky job that I got, and I worked there for about 7 years, creating animations for scientists for scientific lectures. A lot of that was cellular molecular biology, and it was a lot of fun, something I still enjoy a lot. And then I moved out to Hollywood in about 2005 because I wanted to upgrade my skills, and I wasn't, I was on the East Coast of the United States, and I wasn't feeling like I was getting enough opportunities to do animations. So I moved out to West Coast, Hollywood, worked in production for, studios, but is also doing scientific animation for companies such as DigiZyme. My good friend Gail McGill at DigiZyme. And so I was kind of doing both worlds for a while. And then I had a job with Gail McGill, DigiZyme, working on some animations for the Boston Museum of Science. And the animation involved some insects. And I started modeling the insects. And it kind of combined a number of different areas of interest all at once. One was the fact that, I like I like organic modeling and I like science, but I also like hard surface modeling and robotic type stuff. So insects are the perfect intersection of those two things, or those three things rather. And there was a lot of the scientific stuff that I really enjoyed. I like modeling with something that has, it's reality based. In other words, it's not just making stuff up. Because if I just make stuff up, that's cool, and there's plenty of people who do it well, but you feel kind of lost, or I feel kind of lost, like I need it grounded in something. And then what happened is I got a job with Gail, or we won a contract to do E.O. Wilson, Ed Wilson's Life on Earth, which is a digital textbook for the iPad. The iPad had just come out. And so I had an opportunity to work directly with E.O. Wilson's team, even though I was on the West Coast and they were in Harvard on the East Coast. And so for the book, naturally, or for the digital textbook, naturally, I started reading some of E.O. Wilson's books, and I quickly just fell in love with his writing style and his approach. So E.O. Wilson is the guy who wrote the giant book of ants that I was showing earlier. He's an ant biologist, but also an evolutionary biologist. And I found his work to be incredibly inspiring, especially when it comes to biodiversity and that kind of thing. And so that's when I kind of became obsessed. I modeled a few ants and they were pretty good, decent. Then I thought I'd try modeling my own creations, my own insects. And then every time I came up with something I thought was really clever and an imaginary or sci-fi insect, I would do a little research and find out that nature was much more interesting. And so after a while, it's just like, I'm just going to stick to doing the natural world for as long as I can. And every once in a while, I'll do I've done a few sessions where I've made up a bug, but I find the real world stuff so much more satisfying. So that's basically where I'm at. And, there's so many bugs out there and so many different things to learn from them that I never really get tired of it. And I have a long list of bugs that I want to do, and I keep discovering more. Does that answer your question? But that's what triggered it. And the Life on Earth series that we did for the iPad, it was really cool. Unfortunately, Apple didn't promote it as much as I wish they had. Basically, what happened was Steve Jobs, before he passed, had this vision of redoing education based on the iPad. And so he wanted to make the iPad the textbook that kids would bring to school and work on, in their backpacks, as opposed to all these other textbooks. So as a test case, he did this E.O. Wilson's Life on Earth. So E.O. Wilson was the primary author. We had a bunch of other authors. And it was 9 volumes that covered biology. Let's say high school AP biology was the target audience. Unfortunately, it became so huge, it pretty much filled up the entire iPad at the time. The other problem was that the iPad rollout for education, they botched it because some school districts, coincidentally LAUSD in Los Angeles, ended up spending a lot of money on iPads and less money on teachers. And as you can imagine, that pissed off a lot of teachers. Then there was the unforeseen problem that we all know now, which is that screen time is really bad for kids learning. It's not just worse than books. It's actually detrimental to learning, I think, and because the teachers have no way to control what students are looking at on their electronics, and it's just not a good way to learn. So it was an experiment that didn't quite work. It was a fun project to work on. I got to do a lot of really cool animations and stuff, covering lots of different areas of biology, but it just didn't hit the way that we thought it would. It's kind of like VR. You know, VR never really took off the way that everybody hoped it would. And so, you know, it's a shame. But like right now, if you know, I wouldn't change the experience for anything because it was a wonderful experience, but at the same time, I think that we should definitely think twice how we use electronic stuff as a teaching method in school. Nothing beats good old books, you know. So here is a different spider that I did a while back that I had better reference for the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat a little bit since I don't have very good reference for the bottom of our spider. I'm going to use this. You can see this is very different though. Look at the pedipalps on this guy as opposed to our spider, where you have these really long appendages here, the pedipalps right here, as opposed to this guy who has itty bitty. I mean, it's, you know, let's not make fun of him. It's not his fault, but very small pedipalps. But this one has really cool in terms of the glycery and the eye arrangement is totally different. But I think what we can do is, I'm going to cheat a little bit. So this is probably going to piss off you entomologists out there. But if I could find some better reference for the bottom, at least I have something, which is better than nothing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this guy and do Shift S to drop him to the canvas. So this is no longer a 3D model. This is just dropped to the canvas. And I'll use this as my 3D reference. So I'll go back to my guy and take a look at the bottom here. And yeah, I've done a number of mammals. I've done a lot of lizards. I love lizards. I need to get back into doing snakes, and I've done fish and some sharks. Fish and sharks are cool. I mean, sharks are cool, but after you've done a number of bugs, a shark is like just a big blob of meat. It's not as big of a challenge because you don't have so many different parts that are folding in together and stuff. But I've done some crustaceans. I mean, if you check out my website, I don't have everything up there, but I have a bunch. My favorite mammal, of course, is doggy. Whoops. I'm doing some interior here. This is not an insect at all. Let's see. So yeah, I've done a lot of arthropods. Obviously, Let's see. So, sea slug. That was a fun one. Seahorse. And then I've done some crustaceans. And this guy is a lot of fun. I need to texture him one of these days. Seahorses, some bacteria models. This was done for Raised by Wolves. It's corpse of a giant serpent. But I have some mammals in here somewhere. Some fish. Trilobite. People counts as mammals, right? And then lizards. My favorite. One of my favorites. Bugs are my favorite, but lizards. Galapagos, Christmas iguana. This guy, one of my favorite horned toads. I've done this several versions of this guy. And then somewhere down here I have a seahorse where people, not a seahorse, sorry. Well, I've done a seahorse, but this is elephant steel. This was a quick study. I'd like to go back and redo it because you can see it's not quite finished, but it was fun to do. It's just the head. And then this guy is a sea lion, which I actually did a 3D print of. That was another just fun, just experiment. So I did a 3D. This is one of my first 3D prints. I glued the hairs in, by the way. The hairs are actually, I think, guitar strings. A fishing line. But yeah, and some octopuses and other stuff. And some imaginary bugs. So yeah, I gotta get, and then I have a dog in there somewhere. I also done. I did a portrait of my dog. So enough of that. Thanks. I've been doing ZBrush for a long time, and I love it. I like doing bugs. I mean, I like doing living organisms, but every once in a while I'll do some robots and things, you know, some spaceships. And like right now, I'm doing an interior of a French cafe with, obviously I'm in France right now, so what could be more inspiring than a French cafe? But it's fun to do an interior because it's a completely different world. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to do a quick retopo. And actually, before I do that, since I'm still in ZRemesh mode, let's kind of create a bottom here. Whoops. Just have some geometry. And let's turn on. So spiders, generally what they do is they inject their prey with venom and then kind of liquefy the insides of the prey and then just suck out the goo, the tasty insect smoothie or spider smoothie if they're eating another spider or whatever it is they're eating. So their mouths are somewhat limited in terms of the anatomy, but again, it'd be nice to have some more reference on the mouths of this guy. I probably do have it in my key. I was hoping to spend some time putting together reference for this guy before my live stream, but life kind of got in the way and had other things I had to do this week. So hopefully I'll try and do it next week. But right now I'm just kind of roughing it. Bonsoir. We actually had a hot weather. I know it's very relative, but we got up to like 93 this weekend. I took a trip over to Futuroscope for my daughter's 7th birthday, which is a lot of fun. Here in La Rochelle, it was like in the 80s today. Or no, 70s or 80s today, so it was getting kind of hot. Not quite Los Angeles heat, but hot for France. And they don't really have a whole lot of air conditioning here, so that's fun. Learning how to do I guess we call it the French sweat. Eat a lot of baguettes and sweat it out. Like the meat sweats, but the French version. Okay, so admittedly, this is super rough. I don't want to change the shape too much, though, because I am actually matching a diagram, but in my haste In duplicating the legs here, I've gotten a little bit far away. So what I'll do is Alt-click on that, W for the gizmo. Tuck this guy in. Alt-click on this. This one's nice because a lot of times doing spiders, the legs get really crowded here towards the back, but not so much in the case of this one. So far, it's okay. Oops. Three most important tips for aspiring creature artists. It's hard because they're all related, but the first thing is treat the anatomy of creatures the same way that you would treat the anatomy of humans. In other words, there's not a character artist alive who can get away with faking human anatomy. People are brutal in how they judge human anatomy on models, and they should be, because nowadays with scans and all that kind of stuff, when I started back in the day, you could get away with murder on your human anatomy. You can't do that now. So you should be the same with creatures. In other words, you need to study the anatomy of what you're doing, whether it's bugs. I mean, obviously, if you have a background in entomology, you have a leg up. So I would take that stuff seriously. In a related note, I would say is try to avoid the temptation to kit bash biology. It's very tempting to compile, and a lot of people teach this way too. Get a whole bunch of images of creatures that you think look really cool, and then do a big smorgasbord where you mush them all together. If you're really good, you can get away with that if it's grounded in some kind of anatomy. If you're looking at details and coloration and that kind of thing, that's fine. But if you start kit bashing in biology, that's where we get the really crappy creature designs that just they look kit bashed, you know what I mean? One of the, my favorite artists is Neville Page, primarily because, and I know he gets criticism for his aliens sometimes, but if you really listen to the guy, you understand that he's working in production, so he's doing his best to satisfy a director or a writer's needs, usually a director's needs. But regardless, what I like about him, what I enjoy his lectures and his approach is he always tries to ground it in some kind of reality. So even if he's kid bashing, he'll kid bash in a way that makes sense. But I really can't stand when people just like, look, I made a mutant and they put a fly head and a spider body. And I can't tell you how many times, I taught ZBrush for a long time at Gnomon live class. Every single semester I had somebody do a spider body with a female torso and big boobs and a scary face. Like every single class. And they always thought they were doing something new. And I was just like, my God, I have seen this design so many times. It's just, that's insane. But I digress. But that's kind of an example of kid bashing, which I can't stand. So I would say don't kid bash biology. So study anatomy, don't kid bash. And then the third thing is get a camera, go out in the field and take pictures whenever you can, because that's one of the best ways to learn. What it is it's more than just getting your own reference, because you can get loads of reference, and I've been a little bit lazy in getting reference online for this project. But the thing about going out in the field with a camera is that it forces you to be literally in the environment, the habitat, the ecosystem of the organisms, and just being there and being present. And not in a new agey sense, but being in a present there, you glean a lot, because you start looking at how the insects, the organisms, work within that environment. I think that's a really important thing. The other thing is if you take classes in photography, whatever, you're bound to run, especially entomology or birding or whatever, you're going to run into scientists, and scientists are your greatest resource. The great thing about scientists is that most scientists, with a few exceptions, will not shut up about their work, and if you just sit there and take notes, because they will give you all sorts of great information. It could be a little bit frustrating sometimes because scientists, unlike normal people, are used to and comfortable being wrong. That's something that I think a lot of people don't understand about scientists or science in general. Science is mostly about being wrong, and so scientists will not be shy about telling you when you're wrong or you got something totally off. But that's a good thing, you know. So that's 4 pieces of advice, but you know, I think those are the things that I've learned, you know. The other thing about taking pictures is you learn a lot about, it's a great way to study composition, because composition in most other art forms, if it's drawing or painting or sculpting or digital art or whatever, takes a lot of time, whereas photography is instant. And so you start to understand what you like in your own vision. You know, you just like everybody else, would take tips from other photographers and about composition and that kind of thing, which is a good place to start. But the more you do it, the more you discover what you like. And a lot of the things that I do are based on the way that I would take a picture of a bug in the field. I still think I'm not a great photographer by any means. I don't really want to be because I don't have the time. I wish I could, but if I did. But I like the images that I take. I like to try and take pictures that tell some kind of story and go beyond just kind of the typical pretty looking butterfly images. Not that there's anything wrong with that. So, you know, it's bugs just like anything else. I mean, bugs are exoskeletons. And so it's tempting to just look at dead bugs and use that as reference. But as I've said many times, dead bugs still look different from live bugs. And a lot of times you can make mistakes by using only dead bugs as your reference. I've done that plenty of times, especially when it comes to texturing them. Okay, so he's looking pretty cute. I probably got the proportions off a little bit, but at least now it's got something a little bit more useful. Okay, so what I'm going to do is let's go back to this guy. Let's save. Oh, well, then you're way ahead of me. I've read a lot of books. How about that? Where did you get your diplomas from? Yeah, I can't stand when people mix the exoskeletons and endoskeletons. This is a typical thing where they just do like a big muscles on top of the exoskeleton. It drives me crazy. My wife Irene has actually studied a lot of botany, which is a great way to learn about, well, not just plants, but also insects and stuff like that. Oh, Center of Excellence. Interesting. Yeah, I'd like to get into doing some, I've only done a couple birds. Obviously, feathers are a real challenge. And I had to do the birds quickly. I did a duck for an ad. A flying duck is all right. And I did a raven for, I haven't actually seen it, but if you've seen M. Night Shyamalan movie, his little studio logo animation, I did the bird on that one, which is kind of fun. But I haven't seen any of his movies, so I haven't actually seen it in the theater. I've done a few birds, but I really like to get into doing birds more. Yeti has some nice feather stuff. Feather stuff, you know what I'm saying. Then I need to learn better. There's a, I forget her name, but there's one artist that specializes in birds, and her stuff is just amazing. There's a bunch of people who do a lot of specialize in dinosaurs as well. I started doing bugs because I realized there just wasn't that many people who were devoting that much time to it, so it was a nice niche to get into. Sadly, I did not get, when I was in Hollywood and I had done a whole Gnomon video series on ants and wasps and all this kind of stuff. I found out later that from somebody who knew somebody at Marvel that they had considered giving me a call to work on Ant-Man, but instead they just watched my Gnomon videos and had their artist do that. So I missed an opportunity to work on Ant-Man, but whatever. Because I gave away all my secrets, I guess. But whatever, what are you going to do? Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I want to do a ZRemesh on this, but I want to make sure that I don't lose my details. So I'm going to start doing some polygrouping here to see if I can use the polygrouping as a way to kind of guide the ZRemesh. There are ways to do this and other ways to do this. There's like ZRemesh curves, but I'm not really crazy about them. I just like using polygroups because they're very straightforward and easy to create. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the control key and go into brushing, and under auto masking, I'm going to turn on back face mask for the mask brush so that I don't have the mask going through the thinner parts here. So I'm just painting a mask here along this area, along this edge. And then I'm going to go into masking. Whoops. And I'll do boost mask. And then Control W to create a polygroup. So there we go. We have a polygroup there. And then I'm going to do a polygroup for this. This mask this area right here. Yeah, I mean, the way that I did it, you know, because I had this sort of gliding animation and a little bit of flapping of the wings, is I ended up rigging in Maya and actually creating joints for the for each of the feathers, the major feathers, and then just giving, you know, in the skeleton, and then just giving them a little bit of noise in the animation to simulate wind. That worked pretty well. But really, if you want to get into it, you know, obviously there are techniques for, I mean, birds is something that are created a lot for movies. So there's lots of information out there on how to do proper rigging for birds. You just have to kind of find it. And like I say, there's some artists that specialize in it. I think there might be some stuff on the Gnomon workshop that's bird related. But Yeti definitely has some nice feather algorithms and algorithms. I don't know if that's what I mean to say. Feather systems. That's what I'm thinking of. So I'm just creating a little mask for the eye area here. And actually what I'm going to do is let's boost the mask there. Where the mask? Boost mask. Oops. Now let's just do boost mask, sharpen mask. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to do that, and then I will do ZRemesh. Brain stopped. Turn on keep groups. Let's do half. And let's see how this looks. It's okay. I mean, I could do a hand retopology if I really wanted to. Let's do this. I'm going to, instead of half, let's do same. I think that's a little bit better. think that works for now. So okay, so now subdivide it. Push this in just a little bit. I'm going to turn off mask by polygroup for a second. What I should do is put the actual geometry for the eyes in next, just so I have those placeholders in the right place, so it doesn't get squished around too much. So let's look at our oh, this guy is so cute though. I mean, that's just adorable. I think I got kind of a little bit of a spooky skull thing going on here, which I don't really want. These are really forward-looking eyes. Spider puppy. Yeah, I mean, a giant puppy-sized jumping spider would be an awesome pet. But I don't know what you would feed it, because I don't want puppy-sized flies ever. I didn't want to think about that. So I guess we could create a robotic jumping spider. That'd be kind of a cool thing to do in VR. It'd be to build a like a puppy-sized jumping spider pet that could follow you around and stuff. But you wouldn't be the only one who could see it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is let's save this guy. Save. Let's append a sphere or append a star. I think append a star would be a great name for someone. Hi, my name is Appendastar. It's toward the end of the live stream, things get weird. Let's do this. Shrink it down. You know, whatever organism you're doing, whether it's, spiders are mostly legs and hair, depending on the spider. Butterflies are mostly wings. There's not much more to butterflies than wings. The bodies and the legs are kind of boring, actually. Well, the mouth part, the proboscis, is awesome. I always kind of think about that when I'm working a bug. It's like, what's the main thing about this bug that I need to be concerned about? Ants have awesome faces. I usually spend a lot of time in the faces of ants because that's where you find a lot of the diversity. I actually did a really cool ant model for an Australian museum, but I can't share it yet because it's still under NDA. But it was based on a bulldog ant and some other really cool springtail models, which I can't share. But eventually I will be able to, hopefully. These are about the same size. And we got these little itty bitty eyes in the front. Spider eyes are pretty simple. They're single lens as opposed to insect eyes, which are multi-lens. Jumping spiders most spiders have terrible vision. That's why it's really irritating when people they see a spider across the room and they think a spider is watching them. It's like, no, it's not. It's listening to you maybe, but it's not watching you. Yeah, my cat's around here somewhere, so. Well, if you get into Gnomon Workshop, I have a number of videos on there that hopefully you'll enjoy. I have a jumping spider one on there, orchid mantis, kind of an imaginary wasp one, which is a little bit dated. Maybe you should ask them about updating that one. And then I have a bunch of, I have the intro to Maya series, as well as a series on UV mapping. So got a lot of stuff in the Gnomon Workshop and more to come. So if you enjoy listening to my voice, you'll hear more of it. Let's see. This is a Lynx spider. Kind of a very common, sort of beautiful green spider. So started working on it last week, just refining it this week. I'm going to be finishing up this stream in about 10 minutes or so, and then I'll continue it next week, and then we'll get into poly painting, because that's where most of this poly painting and also creating the hairs for this guy. And I'll be rendering it in Redshift for ZBrush eventually. So now that I have the eyes, let's unmask it. Let's duplicate them over. Let's see. Geometry. Deformation. Mirror. And then we could also use the subtool master. I keep forgetting. Let's save this real quick. Subtool master is another great way to mirror stuff. I usually use mirror and weld because I'm lazy. But if you go to subtool master and you choose mirror, then you have more options. We want to do the x-axis and merge into one subtool. Always save before you use this, just in case you mess up the merging. And choose OK. And there we go. We got our eyes. There we go. Yay. The nice thing about subtool master mirror option is you don't have to necessarily delete lower levels of subdivision. And you can also choose to have the mirror be a separate subtool. So, and it's already installed in ZBrush. You don't have to install it or anything like that, even though it's a plugin. Okay, so we got here, and then let's do a little bit of work on the body here. Let's see if we can find. Oh yeah, the bulldog is really, of course it's Australian, because everything in Australia is like at 11. You know, they can't undo. You know, they have to overdo everything when it comes to biology there. So I love the bulldog ant. It's terrifying. She's terrifying. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start roughing in with clay tubes, just this kind of area around here. This is really, I mean, this is such a small part of the spider, but it's such a cool part because it's a great place where you get to experiment with doing mixing translucent surface, smooth translucent surface with a rough diffuse surface. And there's a lot of like very tiny hairs or setae or whatever they call them. I can never pronounce that right there. But I'm just going to kind of rough it in here. And let me see, we're about 1 million, so that's good for now. And kind of like the jumping spider, if you look close, there's like little hairs that surround the eye here. Nothing like waking up to a house spider descending on you. In our house, whenever we find a spider, we say, eat more flies, and we let the spider do its thing. But here in France, the spiders are actually surprisingly big. I went to school in Tallahassee, at a school called Florida State University. I actually majored in music there, believe it or not. That was a long, long time ago. But it was a great experience. But Tallahassee means big old roaches, or if you want to call them palmetto bugs, but we know what they really are. They're roaches. So I'll finish tonight with a story about roach. I have a few roach stories from Tallahassee. And this is long before I was interested in insects. Back then I was not a big fan. But I spent a summer working at a place called Door Products, And we made doors, and we also made doorknobs and door hinges. And we installed doors and doorknobs and door hinges. It's a fascinating world of doors. We didn't do windows though, just doors. And so one day I was tasked with going to the local mall, Governor Square Mall, Tallahassee, if you know it. And there's a restaurant in Tallahassee, I kid you not, it's called Lucy Ho's. Lucy, H-O, apostrophe S. Asian restaurant, unfortunate name. And they had several restaurants throughout the greater Tallahassee area, but they had one at Governor Square Mall, the food court. So you can see where this story is going. And so my task that day was they had some back doors to the kitchen that were rusted out. So these are metal doors that tend to be hollow, and they have, like cardboard on the inside, kind of a typical thing. So I had to go and work on repairing the door. And so we went there. I went there with my colleague. I'm probably going to get in trouble with Lucy Hose for telling this story, but sorry. We fixed the situation, so let's put it that way. It's a happy ending. So we went to see this metal door, and it had some rusted spots and some holes in it. And we decided that the best course of action would be to take the door off the hinges, bring it back to the shop, and repair it or replace it there. And so my colleague and I took the door down, and I carried it, big metal door like this, on the side of my shoulder, my head, all the way back to the trucks. Big, heavy door. And I had to walk, through the parking lot, blah, 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 to the loading area, put it back in the truck, put it in the back of the truck, drove back to the shop, got out of the truck, went to look into the bed of the truck. The bed of the truck was filled with roaches, probably a good, 6 inches deep, just completely filled with roaches. And I had been carrying the whole thing on. So I had some nightmares based on that. We had to kill all the roaches and clean it out. We replaced the door, so we improved the situation for Lucy Ho. It was a food court at a mall. What do you expect? Okay, so I think I've gone a little bit too far here. So what I'm going to do is smooth this out and just kind of start to demarcate this area. Little face here. I got too into the roach story with Lucy Hose. So one thing we can do though, because I went too far, let's go back in time. Right here. Use the morph brush to clean up this area. I love the morph brush. Morph brush is wonderful. So I just stored the history state from back when this was smooth, and now I'm using the morph brush to go and kind of restore that area. This would be a cool Halloween mask. The other story I have in Tallahassee is much shorter. I woke up one night with a giant palmetto bug right on my face. That was good. That'll get your adrenaline going. You're talking about this eye and this eye? Yeah, I think you're right. I think these look a little bit too big too. Let's do this. I think they're too big, which is why they look too close. Same thing, right? And the other thing is like working with perspective off sometimes can throw you. And turn perspective on. Oops. I had a long relationship with the Newman Workshop. I actually came to them a long, long time ago with the idea of doing a, but I had already been teaching there. Hold on a second. All right, chaos, chaos. And I came to them with the idea of doing a workshop on insect. Well, I think that was the first one I talked to them about. And then they came to me to ask me to do the Maya Introduction to Maya series, which is a huge honor because I learned Maya from watching Alex Alvarez's, believe it or not, VHS tapes when the Newman Workshop first started out. Yeah, it's still too close. And so they asked me to do the intro series because I'd been teaching Intro to Maya there, and also I'd written some books on Maya and that kind of thing. So they knew I was able to do it, but it was kind of cool to be able to do those, update those titles. Talk about this distance right here. Yeah, I think that looks a little better. Yeah, I know. I love the little hairdo on here. That's one of the reasons why I picked this particular spider. It's just adorable. It's got a little mop top. I'm just kind of roughing this stuff out, and then I'll probably refine it more as I get into the poly painting. But I think my symmetry's off a little bit too. Let's take a couple looks at some of the other ones. It's too bad the pictures get kind of blurry. All right, well, I think this is where I'm going to leave it. Yeah, this image, they're really close together, but I think it's better to go off the photographs. Okay, so I think I'm going to leave it there for tonight. and or today, depending where you are. For me, it's nighttime. Has Pixelogic developed any AI tools into ZBrush? No, not at the current time. I don't know what the future is for that kind of thing. That's a great question to ask Paul Gabry. So if you can check out his live stream, anything Pixelogic or Maxon related in terms of the future of ZBrush, he's the guy to talk to. And of course, his live stream is excellent. So I would ask him that question. But at the moment, there's no AI tools in ZBrush. I do know that if you want to have a few idea of what the future of ZBrush is going to look like, check out ZBrush for the iPad. That's the direction ZBrush is headed in, and it takes a little getting used to, but the interface for the iPad is really awesome. I think they made a lot of improvements to it, and there's more to come. So check that out. I mean, I was in the beta program for the release that they came out with. Was it last month? And they made a lot of cool improvements, but I think that the goal is to have the iPad and the desktop version more in sync, closer together. So yeah, I'll leave you guys with that, and I'll be doing this next week. No, I'm using a PC. I'm using a Origin PC, which I like, except for the fact that the fan's really loud. I don't know why, because I have two of them and one of them is very quiet. Anyways, I'll see you guys next week, and thanks very much for joining me, and talk to you then. We'll continue this guy and hopefully get into some color next week.